There's a sense in which this is, if I just go on aside and think about the disciples and their relationship with Jesus, Jesus' own followers. And you know, he just showed up, it seems, on the lakeside of Galilee, the shores of Galilee, and confronted them and said, "Come, follow me," and they just did, without necessarily any sort of prior initiation process or getting to know him or what have you. We don't know that there wasn't one, but there doesn't seem to be a prominent thing in the text of the Gospels anyway. Jesus just simply says, "Come, follow me," and they follow him almost blindly, it seems, at first. There's a sense in which they accept his authority as it stands, and yet we know from reading the Gospels and from the stories that the disciples really don't know who this Christ is. They don't know what he's about in full, and that their responses to him are constantly filled with misunderstanding, that they are expressing opinions and ideas which run counter to where he is leading them. But he's very patient in drawing them back to suffering. And so there's a submission on their part, and we know that along the way a lot of people did say, "Yes, I'll follow you, Lord," but then fell away. They found his teaching not conducive to their own sensibilities. Remember the teaching in John 6, Jesus said, "Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you." And many found this teaching too hard to accept. And Jesus turned to his disciples and he said, "What about you? Do you want to leave as well?" And they said, "Lord, to whom else can we go? You have the words of eternal life." It seems to me a similar kind of act of faith is necessary in the life of the church as well. We have been placed in a relationship with leaders who have been entrusted by God with grave and solemn responsibilities to lead us to God through the cross of Christ. And God knows that leaders often fail in this regard and don't lead clearly or well. But it seems to me that it's the constant exhortation of the New Testament for us to respect the vocation and calling of our leaders and their authority, and to, on this journey of obedience, to grow, and on this journey of faith, to grow in understanding, so that increasingly the mind of Christ becomes our mind too, so that the truths proposed by Christ become recognised by us as congruent with our very being, rather than opposed to who we really want to be. And this is, again, goes back to the inner conflict we feel between wanting to be free beings and not wanting to be under authority. Remember Jesus' words, it's in knowing the truth that you find freedom. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Ultimately, there won't ever be human freedom for us or anyone else apart from the truth. Ubi veritas, where there is truth, then there is freedom. Oh, sort of waxed a bit lyrical there. Forgive me.
One more question? One more question, if anyone's got one.
Thanks for the talk. It was very informative and profound. Philosophical question to carry on for what you're talking about. In the eyes of God, what does it mean to be truly free?
In the eyes of God, what does it mean to be truly free? Yeah, well, I'd love to be a sage and a wise man and be able to give a one-sentence answer to that question that wraps it all up profoundly and provides, a lifetime's worth of food for thought. The answer, surely is found in the crucified Son of God. What does it mean to be truly free? To be truly free is to pray, "Father, let your will be done. That's what it means to be truly free. And this is a freedom that got Christ crucified, that is manifested in his being strung up naked, spat upon, mocked. I'm not trying to create a sentimental picture here. There is a reality of human freedom revealed in the cross of Christ, which, if we don't ever see it, we'll never be free and we'll never know what freedom is. It's there for us to see in the cross of Christ, but it's hidden. It's hidden under oppression. It's hidden under death and suffering. It's hidden under totally being bound up by necessity rather than being free. But surely, if Jesus Christ has got anything to do with the meaning of life and the reality of God, then human freedom is defined by what he is and particularly by his cross. That's all I can say to you.
I'm going to cheat and just add one more final question, Dr.
Oh,
Desmond.
it was a great note to finish on.
Sorry. I know when I was at uni, it's a kind of a general conception that philosophy, as it's studied today, or maybe as it's practiced today in the halls of academia, it's sort of seen as being a pointless pursuit, or there's no chance, there's no possibility of really figuring anything out, of really discovering any truth, because there is no such thing as truth. What can you say about that idea that I encounter it every day talking to people? There's this belief that you can't discover truth; it's not possible.
Yes. Yeah. Look, almost all the human sciences, so to speak, all fields of human knowledge have suffered under the weight of a kind of universal skepticism that has plagued Western history since about the time of Francis Bacon in the late medieval period, who advocated for science, rightly, a kind of a method, a process of doing science by methodological doubt. How do you do science properly? Well, you start by doubting the findings that you've taken for granted, that you've accepted for so long. And this, of course, became sort of axiomatic in the philosophy of René Descartes, great mathematician, but who, again, took it as his starting point to doubt everything that he'd ever learned, any teacher had ever given him, and to start by creating his own world of reality, so to speak, and his own rules for knowing reality through a process of methodical doubt. But this, in the course of Western history, has led to a kind of universal skepticism about the possibility of knowing anything that is real or true in a whole heap of ways. Metaphysically, there's the whole business, and epistemologically, solipsism, that we'd have no access to the world of reality, that whatever we perceive is simply a product of our senses, or at least mediated by the senses, and therefore that's all we know. We only assume that represents real things. But it transfers into the whole moral arena too, the impossibility of there being universal rights and wrongs, because look at all the differences between peoples of cultures and what have you, and surely, all morality is a projection of individualism and human self-appetite and, manipulation of society to further individual ends. And so skepticism has reared its head in a number of forms, not least of which is a kind of an epistemological and an metaphysical skepticism about reality at all. And while that's perhaps an appropriate process for science, it seems to me to be for certain natural sciences, it's a devastating process on other forms of human knowing, in which we rely upon receptivity and trust concerning matters of truth.